Hey, this is Andy here with Libertarian Revolution, and I'm at Anarchapulco in Acapulco, Mexico, and I got a very special guest here today, prolific YouTuber, That Guy T, also known as Talib Brown. Yes, now let me tell you, how did you get started on your political journey?
It goes back a pretty far time, like maybe back to my conspiracy days. That's what got me originally involved in it. And that I started finding interest in conspiracies through like Alex Jones' InfoWars. And that's because I also, prior to that, had an interest in fictional, like post-apocalyptic scenarios. I just found it like fun as a fictional concept, like zombie movies and stuff. And I found like groups called like the Preppers and groups preparing for like, you know, FEMA camp relocations and stuff like that. And I just found it cool as a teenager. So I started getting involved with it and begging my mom to buy us water filters and stuff like that. But after that, I got more involved in like understanding the principles of liberty, the principles of freedom, and, you know, just the philosophy behind it. And then I was always a capitalist, but I found a reconnection to my love of the pursuit of capital. So
now, were you political at all before you started looking into this stuff?
No, not really. I was pretty apolitical. I was supportive of Obama's first term, but just because he was a black president. I didn't know anything about politics. I didn't approve of Bush, but only because of like Hurricane Katrina and stuff like that. So I was really apolitical. I didn't really care one way or the other. Most of my family were Democrats, and we always told Democrats are the side that, you know, help out black people and stuff. So that was just my thought process. Yeah.
Now, when you started listening to Alex Jones, did you hear him talking about Ron Paul or using the word libertarian at all?
Yeah, that's what made me shift from, you know, just solely the conspiracy side of the issue to actually learning more about the actual liberty concepts. You know, Ron Paul's appearances, people like Gerald Celente and Jeff Berwick and different you know, personalities that actually value liberty coming on this show. And Ron Paul is one of those inspirations.
Now, would you label yourself as a 9/11 truther? I am.
I mean, it's not a controversial thing. I guess it depends on what you mean, but if what I assume you mean is that, you know, the government in some way did either have some sort of absolutely, I think, had some sort of involvement in the downing of the towers, either overtly or through just clear and sheer utter ignorance, or maybe it's too strong of a trust in our.
Yeah, I think ignorance is giving them too much credit.
Yeah, it is, and so yeah, I definitely believe that there are certain things that certain coordinated events that took place that incentivized or even orchestrated the happenings of 9/11. And I definitely don't think it was just a random, spontaneous attack.
What got you into posting videos online, and when did you start posting videos online?
I started posting stuff online probably about like 4 or 5 years ago now.
Okay. Did you start out as That Guy T?
I didn't. I actually started out as another YouTube channel called Hollow Trip, which I wish I still had my videos from. I had deleted that channel. And that was more like prepper stuff when I was more so listening to Alex Jones on a consistent basis, and you know, like Sandy Hook, like different like FEMA camp, just that whole sphere of information. But
when did you start That Guy T?
I started That Guy T about 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh wow, so it's been around longer than I realized.
Yeah, and some of my other videos I did get rid of, but pretty much now everything is up to date. And I started doing it mainly because it was just really an outlet to document my thoughts. You know, I like seeing myself grow, and I love like finding like old pictures of myself and stuff, and reminiscing with family. And I'm like, well, I would love to do this also when I'm like, as far as like my ideological perspectives go.
How old were you when you first started posting videos?
When I first started posting videos on my previous channel, that was around 16.
And then what, you were 18 when you started That Guy T?
Yeah, I was around 18, 19.
So can I ask how old you are now?
Right now I'm 23.
Okay. Okay, you seem pretty knowledgeable for somebody 23.
I don't think so. I mean, it's basic concepts. Like
you don't see too many 23-year-olds that have your level of knowledge of this stuff.
Yeah, and it's just because I enjoy like seeking out understanding, and anytime I meet somebody with a new perspective, you know, whether it be you know, from the 9/11 truth movement to even, you know, like communists or Nazis or any group. I just really enjoy like understanding their perspective, and from there I just investigate and just learn. Now,
was T your? Is that a nickname? Do people call you T?
Yeah, nickname. Yeah, it's just. I was thinking of a name for the channel because everybody has like that's one of the things you're scared about is what's the perfect channel name, and I was just like. Well, just that guy T.
But were you called T? Like, did people call you, like friends or family?
No one ever really called me T. I have a cousin that called me T.
Okay.
But T was just the first letter of my last name. I meant my first name to lead, and I just figured that's just going to be my thing.
Well, it's a good name.
Yeah, it worked out. Some people say, "Oh, it's so catchy. I wish I could think of something like that."
Yeah. Now, I believe you have a Twitter channel as well. What do you call your Twitter channel?
My old Twitter was at that guy T. They banned that one.
Why did it get banned?
They said that I apparently elicited a threat against somebody.
Oh, okay. Well, I know people can get banned from those things for pretty much nothing.
Yeah, and of course I requested, like, because I don't believe I threatened anybody, and I requested, can I get a screenshot? They said, no, we don't have the proof at the moment. Just know that someone reported you for something threatening. Like, okay. No loss, no foul. It was a good little vacation from that crazy platform. But I am back on there now just because I'm an addict and I can't help myself.
What's your current Twitter channel called?
It's called @BlackGuyT.
Okay. Yeah. It's a still theme on the T.
Yeah.
Now, what is your? I've noticed you have some kind of association with Jeffrey Tucker.
Yeah.
What is your association with him?
Primarily just really good friends. We worked together at Foundation for Education for about 6 months. And
is that a job or is that something you do as a volunteer?
That was something I did as a job at the time. Right now, I do still contribute written articles to them, but not on a somewhat paid basis, but mainly just as volunteer work.
Are you and Jeffrey from the same area? Aren't you from Atlanta, Georgia?
Yeah, we're currently in the same area. Jeffrey's originally Texan, but I'm born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
And that's where he is right now doing his Atlanta Bitcoin embassy, which I'm also going to do some work in assisting and promoting and doing some marketing work for that.
Now, I've noticed that your some of your views seem to have drifted to the right side of libertarianism.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey's known for being a bit on the left side of libertarianism. Does that cause any kind of clashes?
It doesn't. And the thing is, people like my fans, they all say, you know, Jeffrey Tucker is a cuck. They call him Jeffrey Tucker, and then they say, he's a feminist, SJW, communist, and you know he doesn't care about liberty. He's a left libertarian nut job. But really, anytime I have a conversation with Jeffrey, he's more right wing than me.
Oh wow, that's
the
surprising.
only thing is delivery and how he's a really posh, nice guy, and I'm more of a brutalist side. And just because I find it easier just objectively easier to communicate with more far righters. I've learned to tailor my delivery of liberty to persuade people on the right, so it comes across as more authoritarian, more harsh, more brutalist. But it's the exact same position of just, you know, voluntary interaction.
Now, do you still do outreach to people on the left or the center? I mean, or do you only do outreach to people on the right?
Mainly on the right. I would love to try and do outreach to people on the left, but anytime I've tried, I just can't get through certain things. Like, I just don't know how to persuade someone who believes that, you know, like concepts such as egalitarianism, equality, and things like that, which are fundamental, in my opinion, fundamental contradictions to liberty. I don't really know exactly how to go about getting them to abandon that. Whereas on the right, you know, they hold values which are, you know, bigoted, sometimes racist, you know, like white nationalists and stuff. But it's a lot easier for me to just persuade them of like peaceful association, voluntary secession, disassociation, versus where the left, everything is about democracy, forced collectivism, forced equality. And it's hard to break that mindset. So,
what about independents and non-voters? I've kind of long thought that the biggest potential constituency for libertarians are independents and just the people who just don't vote.
I thought that too, and I think that still might be the case. The only thing is about going about getting those people interested. And some people say the best way to do that is to take the centrist route. You know, the route of, you know, saying like libertarianism isn't left wing nor right wing. You know, we're just, you know, a completely different thing. We're not even on the political spectrum. You know, and I think that's the wrong way to do it. I think the right way to do it is just be completely open, completely as straightforward and direct as possible, expressing your views like we are right now in Anarchapulco, just saying, yeah, we're anarchists.
But there's clashes even within the anarchist community of left anarchists and right anarchists.
Yeah, exactly. We just had a debate with Larken Rose and Lauren Southern, who I don't think is an anarchist quite, but it's definitely libertarian sympathetic.
That's one of the reasons why I was hoping to talk to Lauren, because I think she would have done better in the debate had she presented her arguments from a more anarcho-capitalist, like a Rothbardian, Hoppian type arguments, because it made it sound, because I mean, now I don't like to think of myself as left or right. In the past, I've had people accuse me of being too far to the left. Lately, I've had people accuse me of being too far to the right. But, you know, I think one of the biggest issues that libertarians clash over is immigration policy. And I know you put out one video where you were sort of criticizing Lauren Southern, but then you changed it and you put out another, which I thought was a really good video, by the way. It was, what was the name? It was your video on immigration. I can't remember what the name, but what was it?
I can't remember the exact name, but basically if you just went to my channel and typed in borders, it would come up. And yeah, it's just basically my position on that.
Yeah, because I don't think it's
the original one was called, I remember it was
the Great Wall of Lauren Southern. But then you changed it and you kind of you changed your position.
Exactly.
And yeah, that's one of the biggest issues, I think, tearing the libertarian community apart. And really, if I get a chance to talk to Larken Rose, and I got up and I made a comment. Now, unfortunately, my comment wasn't very concise. I don't know. Were you in the room when I made a comment?
Yeah.
And I was trying to bring up, now, I don't know how much I got out, and I should have done a better job of, you know, shortening what I had to say. But I had to actually, surprisingly, I had a few people come up to me and compliment me after that. Because I was trying to bring up that the real issue is private property versus public property. And we're not going to have a libertarian immigration policy as long as we have all these public comments. And you're in a public property along with a democratic welfare state and forced association.
And that's one of the main reasons why right now I'm not an open borders advocate. Just because not only in terms of that, in terms of the welfare state and, you know, increasing the state commons, you know, in terms of like financial and economic resources from the government, not from the government, from the people, stolen from the government and just redistributed. But also because building this idea, like culturally, that democracy and egalitarian representation is okay and that everybody should have a right to entry is I think fundamentally like crippling the concept of private property, which is people being allowed to discriminate. You know, right now people feel like they have an entitlement, like borders shouldn't exist, everybody should have an entitlement to migrate to whatever property they want. Or even in our capitalist society, that wouldn't be the case. You know, like
there would be no open borders in an Anarchapulco unless it was unclaimed property, unless it was vacant land that nobody wanted. And then if somebody came and homesteaded it, then they would set the migration policy onto their property.
Exactly.
So I disagree with Larken Rose. And did you happen to see the debate on YouTube between Adam Kokesh and Stefan Molyneux on the same issue?
I didn't see that debate.
It just happened within the last few weeks. And, you know, I do like Adam Kokesh. He's a great guy. And I may even vote for him for the Libertarian Party nomination. And I generally agree with Adam Kokesh. But I think Stefan Molyneux wiped the floor with him in that debate. You got to see it. I mean, Adam... I wish Adam would kind of rethink his position a little bit. Now, I will say this to Adam Kokesh's credit. He does acknowledge that if we lived in a libertarian anarcho-capitalist society, that immigration would be controlled by private property owners. And his platform is to eliminate the federal government and kick all the issues back to the states and the local level, and then states, you know, could put up immigration restrictions. So I could still get behind his platform, even though I don't agree with him that opening up the borders when you have a democratic welfare state with private property and forced association laws is a legitimate libertarian position.
And that's my main criticism in regards to Adam's position. I've heard him talk about open borders before. I've discussed it with him before. And I've never really commented on like disagreements with Adam's position primarily, but now that I think about it, it basically comes down to the fact that Adam's position is essentially we're going to get rid of the aggression first, like the state aggression of sanctioning border, like a monopoly on borders, and then deal with the cultural aspect of like cultural conflict amongst the different peoples who are coming into this country.
Well, I think it would make more sense to do something about the welfare state and the forced association laws and the land, and then relinquish government control over where you want to turn government. I mean, if you want to go into this ANCAP society, then you need to relinquish government control over land and turn it over to the private property owners. And in my opinion, the rightful owners of the land territory that makes up the United States of America are American citizens who pay taxes. You know, you were born in the U.S., I was born in the U.S., lived there our whole lives. Probably your parents are there, probably your grandparents, same thing with me. And I think that, we own the land.
Yeah.
And the land should be divvied up among the American people. Now, unfortunately, some people like to frame this as kind of like a racist argument, and they say that, you're a racist if you want to keep immigrants out. And now, first of all, speaking for myself, there are some white people I don't want in the country. You know what I mean? Like Piers, I'm a white guy. Piers Morgan, Piers Morgan, the British broadcaster guy. Okay. I think I've got I haven't taken a DNA test, but I think I've got, maybe 12.5% English ancestry. I have some Scottish ancestry. Okay, I would not want Piers Morgan in the country.
Yeah.
Because he's a gun grabber, he's a big government guy. He's like a redcoat. He's the type of guy that the Founding Fathers of the U.S. kicked out of the country.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want him there. I would rather have you in the country than him. You know what I mean? You're a black guy.
Yeah.
So I take people on their ideology. Second of all, I read a recent survey that indicated that black Americans are actually the most opposed to mass immigration of any other group. Did you see that survey? It was reported on in Breitbart.
Yeah, I probably didn't even need to see the survey. I just know that to be true.
Well, yeah, just going from my anecdotal evidence, I've done a lot of political outreach, because I do a lot of ballot access petitioning, like to get the Libertarian Party on the ballot in various states, and I've worked on a bunch of other petition drives. So I've talked to every type of person you could possibly imagine in many, many different states. And I did a petition in California, actually, to prohibit illegal immigrants from collecting welfare. And you know which group of people I found signed that petition the best? Was black American Californians. Almost every black American Californian that I ran into signed the petition with enthusiasm. They were running to sign it. Now, the white people, a lot of them were signing it, but occasionally I'd run into like a white liberal who would come up and give me crap.
Yeah.
Now, as far as like Hispanics or Asians, the ones who were more Americanized, some of them were signing it. Now, obviously, some of them wouldn't. Some of them would come up and get nasty with me. But anyway, it's, most people don't want to have a lot of foreign people. I mean, most people don't mind some immigrants, but most people don't like lots of immigrants coming in to the point where they feel like they're being demographically replaced.
Yeah.
Or immigrants who are hostile to their interests.
Especially when it's like, just artificially subsidized immigration, not even like naturally on their own accord.
Yeah. They're coming in, and lots of these people. I mean, it's one thing.
UN goodie bags on.
It's one thing if an American gets on welfare, and I don't really agree with that. But to me, it's even worse if a foreign person comes in who's not even from the country, and they never even paid taxes there. Their parents never paid tax. They have no right of inheritance, because I feel like you have kind of a right of inheritance. Like if your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents, worked the land, mixing labor with the land and paying taxes and stuff. And I don't like I hate taxes, but it's like, here's the way I look at it with taxes. If I steal your car and I'm driving down the street, I'm giving somebody a ride in your car, it's still your car. You know what I mean? The car doesn't become part of the public commons. It's like your car. So if I'm taxing you and I'm using those taxes to pay for roads or for libraries or public parks, then you should be a rightful owner of that and have a right to use it. I kind of think of it as like a condo association, or like this hotel here. We're in this hotel here in Acapulco, Mexico, and we paid money to be in this hotel. Now, I was going to bring this up to Larken Rose. They got a border outside this motel, and they got guys out there with machine guns. Did you see those guys?
Yeah.
They got there's like 4 guys out there with machine guns.
Yeah. It's really terrible that Larken Rose would be able to support something like this, where we're using men with guns to keep certain people out of the hotel.
Yeah. Now Larken would say, well, this is private. Okay. Now, I don't know if this hotel has gotten tax subsidies or not. If this is anything,
it might be.
It might. Yeah. It may or may not. But here's the way I look at it: the world is arranged into governments, whether we like it or not. That's just the way the world is. Every country, there isn't a place you could go in the world that isn't arranged in that manner. You know what I mean? And now, I would agree with Larken that we should change that, but you have to kind of operate within the world that we're living in. So, like, if the government is monopolizing a service, like let's say the government monopolizes firefighting. Okay, Are you a statist? If Larken Rose's house catches on fire, is he not going to call the government fire department, or is he going to sit there pontificating how taxation is theft and how fire departments should be run, on a voluntary basis by the free market?
Yeah, it's this idea of like any as long as something is functioned by the government, it's illegitimate and you shouldn't partake in it, even if the function itself is like a legitimate thing that just happens to be unfortunately monopolized by the state. But we don't tell people that they, like, for example, the firefighter thing. You don't tell people that I'm just going to let my house burn down because I don't want to use the state apparatus to save my property. Same thing with border restrictions. Granted, you could disagree with the lines on which borders are drawn, but it's even for private property. We use the state to defend our borders. When somebody comes in home invasion and tries to or does come and invade your home, we call the state intrinsically or just generally to come investigate and seek reparations for our damages, and I don't think that's an aggressive thing.
Yeah, well, it's like the state is monopolizing a function. It doesn't mean that the function is illegitimate. So even in Disney World has a gate around it, and they have security guards, and if you want to quote-unquote immigrate into Disney World, you have to buy a ticket. Now, if you sneak into Disney World, their security guards are going to throw you out. Are you being oppressed because Disney World won't let you in unless you buy a ticket? And then what if you buy a ticket to Disney World and you have a 7-day pass and 9 days later you're still in the park? If Disney security catches you and throws you out, are they violating your rights? I would say no.
Yeah.
But anyways, now Larken Rose had a video called "When Should You Shoot a Cop?" And he was talking about, if the police are violating people's rights, that, it would be morally justified to shoot them. Now, that might not always be the most practical thing to do. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend you try this at home, folks. But, a moral case could be made for it. But then he later put out a video called "When Should You Not Shoot a Cop?" And he was even conceding that sometimes the police arrest people for legitimate things. So, I mean, if Larken Rose's car was stolen, or let's say his daughter got raped, is he not going to call the police?
Yeah.
Is he going to say, oh, I'm an anarchist, so I guess we'll just, vigilante justice, dude, I mean.
If it's okay for you to use the state, even though you see it as a fundamental illegitimacy, it's okay for you to use the state to seek justice, in terms of crimes. I don't think as like a function of, utility, then I don't think it's wrong to also, for some people, to use the state to defend and preserve their private property.
Yeah, and like I said, I think most people, you're not really going to have a pure libertarian immigration policy unless you have an anarcho-capitalist society. Because even a policy of just rip the borders open, that's still a statist policy.
Yeah.
Because you're basically the state's just leaving the door open for unlimited numbers of people to use the public commons.
Yeah.
And then once they're in the country, they can become citizens, they can register to vote, and they can start altering the political landscape of the country, and they can start using welfare, social security, you know, putting their kids in the public schools. And then, like, if somebody says you own an apartment building, and let's just say hypothetically you say, well, I don't want to rent to any Muslims. Well, you're going to get a discrimination lawsuit.
Yeah.
So in our present society, I don't think Larken Rose is, and I like Larken Rose, doesn't mean I don't like, I respect him, and he's done a lot of good things over the years, but I don't think his position is such a great purist libertarian position like he was making it out to be. Now, as far as Lauren Southern goes, I think she has legitimate concerns. You know what I mean? And now I wish that she had framed her arguments in a different manner.
And that's the same criticism I made of her last year. She came and well, she didn't do a speech on it, but I had talked to her privately, just about trying to learn. That was the first time meeting her, just, you know, understanding more about the way she thinks, and just an observation that I don't think she's really considered. Like looking into the philosophy of her beliefs so much so.
She did, I watched her, I wasn't at the last Anarchapulco, but I watched videos of it, and I saw the video of her speech, and she flashed a picture of Hans Hermann Hoppe up on the screen.
Yeah.
So she must know who he is.
She knows who he is. I don't know if she's read his books. I know she's, you know, follow like time preference theory and all that good stuff. I'm sure she's familiar with the concept of physical removal.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just one thing that I think if she took more time to like actually understand the philosophy of it, she could have a more grounded.
Because I think she could have turned the tables on Larken and made him out to be the statist.
Yeah.
That's what I would have done, is they should have turned the table and said, no, Larken, you're a statist because you want to use the guns of the state to impose multiculturalism on everyone else.
Yeah, and who knows if anybody from the Anarchapulco team hears this. Maybe a good idea might be to bring Stefan Molyneux here next year. Stefan Molyneux versus Larken?
That would be an awesome debate. Now, what's your opinion of Stefan Molyneux has taken a lot of heat, and I talked to Jeff Berwick yesterday, and he made a comment about Molyneux, and I said, well, you know, I personally did not get behind Donald Trump. I never trusted Donald Trump. I didn't, you know, I'm a Libertarian Party member. And I think Gary Johnson was a terrible candidate. I never supported Gary Johnson either. I actually did vote. And I'll tell you, I've been a member of the Libertarian Party for a long time, but the last Libertarian Party presidential candidate I voted for was 2004 Michael Badnarik. Since then, the Libertarian Party has really gone downhill, nominating Bob Barr and then Gary Johnson twice. And, you know, these were just, and Gary Johnson's second running mate, well, the first running mate he had wasn't that good. The second running mate he had was just absolutely terrible, Bill Weld, just a joke. So I'll tell you, in 2008, I cast a write-in vote for Ron Paul. In 2012, I wrote in none of the above for president. And in 2016, I actually voted for the Constitution Party. I don't know if you're familiar with Darrell Castle. Are you familiar at all with the Constitution Party?
No, I'm not.
They're somewhat like the Libertarian Party. They're like Constitutionalists, but they're more conservative, and they have a wing of their party that is kind of libertarian leaning.
Okay.
But they also have a wing of their party that's like more conservative. This Darrell Castle guy, the guy I voted for president, is actually in their more libertarian wing. Now, the Constitution Party, they've never been as big as the Libertarian Party. They've been around since '92, and they've kind of gone downhill in terms of ballot access. Like they only made the ballot in 24 states. But I happened to be registered in a state where they were on the ballot, and since Darrell Castle was more libertarian than Gary Johnson, I voted for Darrell Castle. But anyway, back to Molyneux, and I also want to talk about Alex Jones and other libertarians or constitutionalists or those type of people who got behind Donald Trump. I think it was basically a case where you knew Hillary Clinton was an absolutely terrible candidate. I mean, that was blatantly obvious, you know.
Yeah.
Gary Johnson was a joke. I mean, he got on the ballot in all 50 states, but what's the point?
He was a meme candidate.
What was the point voting for Gary Johnson? I mean, okay, he's not going to win, but you want to vote for somebody on principle, and Gary Johnson's principles just weren't that great.
He represented liberty, I don't think.
No.
He's not that year.
So, anyway, what is your opinion? Okay, so I think that the guys like Molyneux and Alex Jones voted for, and other people voted for Trump, he sounded kind of like a maverick. And I know that Alex Jones was initially supporting Rand Paul, and he switched to Donald Trump after Rand Paul's campaign fizzled. Now, I never trusted Donald Trump, so I never supported him myself. But what is your opinion of the libertarian and constitutionalist type people who voted for Donald Trump?
I definitely understand it. I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I didn't vote in 2016 at all. I've only voted once in my life. In 2012, I did vote for Gary Johnson. In 2016, I just went and bought AR-15 lowers. I thought it was more productive.
Yeah.
But and somebody asked me this earlier at the conference. They asked, did you pick a side between Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, or Gary Johnson? And in all honesty, I did pick a side. Even though I didn't vote conscientiously, I did pick Donald Trump. And I understand why. I mean, the options that we have were ridiculous. You could say that none of them represent liberty, and that's fine. But we are still hopefully fighting for our survival and our preservation. And it's a lot easier to fight for liberty when you have more money coming back in your pocket a little bit, maybe a little bit more immigration restriction, but you have more resources at your disposal than if we had Hillary Clinton, who would be a complete war hawk maniac, and also probably. Do you think that
Hillary? I mean, it's kind of hard to say, but do you think Hillary Clinton would have been worse than Donald Trump?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't believe that. It's not only that Hillary Clinton, as just the candidate, would have been worse than Donald Trump in terms of her policies, but I think as far as the cultural discussions that need to be had, that arose from Trump's presidency, that are happening right now and really revolutionizing what's going on in America at the moment, I think would not have happened if Hillary Clinton got arrested. I mean, not got arrested.
She should have been arrested.
That would have happened. That's what's on my mind. But if she would have got elected, then I don't think those conversations would have been happening.
Now, how many years have you been a libertarian now?
I've been a libertarian for about, I'd say absolutely strongly, for about 5 years. And I like to do this with all my views, but right now I am challenging my libertarianism. I
saw that online. I was going to ask you about that. Now, it's good to always challenge yourself, but you're here at Anarchapulco. This is obviously a very libertarian conference.
Yeah.
Would you still label yourself a libertarian?
Right now, yeah, but I don't know exactly how accurate it is, this label. Simply because I still definitely consider myself a anarcho-capitalist. But generally the general line is, if you're an anarcho-capitalist, you're a libertarian, but not all libertarians are anarcho-capitalists. Well, I think I may be an anarcho-capitalist that's not a libertarian.
Wow, can you explain that?
The reason being is because I think libertarianism as a philosophy kind of necessitates the universal valuation of rights. And personally, I don't find universalism at all to be legitimate, and it's definitely not practical in terms of a tangible defense of liberty, which I think is of the utmost importance for any self-described libertarian. And because of that universalist, respect for everybody's liberty, sometimes that means you have to respect the same liberty or defend to the same extent the liberty of somebody who's working actively to overthrow your rights as you would somebody who's working actively to defend your rights. And personally, I don't see that as a really moral concern. Like, for example, I believe in free speech. I wouldn't consider myself a free speech absolutist, but I do definitely believe in the concepts, and if we can all have a respectful conversation, I definitely would defend anybody's free speech rights. But if I have somebody going up on stage calling for, my silence, my oppression, or, harm to me, and, somebody comes around and, boosts them off stage, I'm probably not going to rush to their defense, in terms of get them back on stage, let them talk, because what they're preaching, even though it's free speech and they have the right to do so, is in direct, competition with my own freedom. And I think every libertarian, if they're honest about their position, individual freedom is of the utmost importance, and I have to defend my freedom before I defend the freedom of somebody who wants to oppress me.
Now, you put out a video recently that I guess caused some controversy, something about the necessary oppression of the left.
Yeah.
Can you give a brief synopsis of that? Essentially,
I came to the conclusion that because the left, It's not an overt, like active, like I just don't like the left and I want to oppress them. It's more of a de facto oppression, because leftists, in like as far as like in terms of like speaking of like communists, social democrats, whatever you want to call them, progressives, people who follow the philosophy of like Karl Marx and Lenin. They believe that freedom, free markets, individualism, right to self-defense, right to self-preservation, capitalism, they believe that these concepts, private property, are all inherently, like inherent aggressions, inherent violations of what they prescribe or see as freedom. And because of that, if a leftist sees my freedom to engage in voluntary transactions, voluntary interactions, use my weapons as a tool of self-defense against aggressors, be able to keep my income and preserve my private property without turning it into a commune and redistributing all my wealth. If they see that as me oppressing them, then unfortunately they will de facto be oppressed, because I'm not giving up my rights just so somebody else can feel free.
Now, what's your opinion of like theocrats, like a religious extremist? Would you hold them in similar disdain? I'm talking like a Muslim religious fanatic, or any type of religious fanatic that wants to use the force of government to kind of impose their religion on other people.
Yeah, definitely. I don't give theocrats any leeway in that regard. I understand the appeal that in some cultures that they will always have towards theocracy, and very strong, strict belief in the church and a big hierarchical order through theism. And Christianity through the Enlightenment phase kind of left that behind. But in other countries, other cultures, primarily Muslim cultures at the moment, that's still very well the case. And even in some Christians, like there's this guy, Greg Johnson. He's a public alt-right personality, very very hardcore white European traditionalist, very hardcore Christian. And he's one of these guys who's just the pure best example of a real guy who's calling for a nanny state. Like really oppressive Christian theocracy, really a real disturbed moralist. I don't agree with his positions.
Now you brought up the alt-right, and that gets into some very interesting stuff. I know you had a kind of a association, kind of a friendly association with Christopher Cantwell. Yeah. And you were on his show, and Cantwell has, shall we say, made some very nasty comments about various groups of people, including black people, and he throws around the N-word, and you must be pretty thick-skinned to have kind of remained on friendly terms with him. I mean, you must not get offended. You know what I mean? Because I know a lot of people, if you were using that kind of language, they'd be pretty angry at that person.
Yeah,
with the kind of language he uses.
I don't really at all get offended ever. And Cantwell, I've spoken to on numerous occasions.
Have you talked to him post Charlottesville?
A bit, not a whole lot. I haven't kept in contact with him. I haven't kept up with his new podcast that he reopened up. I don't know if he's still doing Radical Agenda or not. I was mainly following his court dealings and seeing when he's going to get out of jail, keeping up with the case in that regard.
do think he got screwed.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Granted, I think he screwed himself a little bit too with doing a Vice News interview. Yeah. Probably not the smartest idea, especially for somebody who's skeptical of the state. But he definitely got screwed over.
I was actually a little bit appalled by some of what I felt was intellectual dishonesty from some people in the libertarian movement, because, Unite the Right had the mass demonstration permit. Like if you're a single speaker or a small group, and I've talked to people in the ACLU about this, you don't need a permit to just go out and speak at a public place, but if you're doing a mass demonstration, you have to get a permit. Yeah. Unite the Right got the permit. Yeah. They had a legal permit to do what they were doing, and the leftist protesters, I think was Antifa, I don't know if Black Lives Matter was there, but just the various leftist groups, they did not have a permit. Yeah. And so really they shouldn't even have been there, but they were also, I think they were the aggressors, honestly. And I'm not saying that I think everybody who was marching, you know, was a wonderful person. I know there were some. They were not all Nazis. It was a coalition of people. Some of them were Nazis, and you know, I don't agree with those people.
Yeah.
But whether you agree with them or not, I mean, under our legal system, they're supposed to have free speech. You could be the most offensive person in the world, and you're still supposed to have a right to speak.
Yeah.
So anyway, I feel like Antifa. Now, Unite the Right. Several weeks before that, they had another event in Charlottesville, and there was no problem because Antifa didn't show up. Then they had their one in August. Antifa showed up. All hell broke loose. Okay, then a month or two after that, they had another event, Unite the Right did, in Charlottesville. Antifa wasn't there, and there was no problem. So that would tell me that Antifa was the source of the problem. They were the aggressors in that occasion.
And I would hope that the number one lesson that people learn from that, I don't think anybody else needs to learn that Antifa at this point is a violent radical leftist terrorist organization.
Yeah, and they're being funded by George Soros and the Ford Foundation.
Yeah, so I think most people get that. If you don't get that already, then you're probably on the side of them. And but I think the one thing that I hope people, especially in the alt-right, learn from this is that you shouldn't rely solely on state police to defend your rights. You know, especially if you're talking about, you know, the corruption, whether you perceive it as corruption of, you know, like Jewish influence or globalist influence in politics and in the state, and the state being run by, you know, all these multicultural globalists, you know, or whatever, if you think the blacks are in control or something like that. Then why would you rely on their police to protect you at a rally?
Well, the police didn't do their job.
They didn't.
Because they were supposed to, the proper police procedure was to keep the groups separate. And they marched Unite the Right people right into the Antifa people. So the police claim that they were taking orders from the mayor. But the police take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution.
Yeah.
And they did not live up to their oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution. So I think the police were definitely in the wrong in that. I think that was like a manipulated event that Charlottesville, you know, that like they wanted all hell to break loose in Charlottesville. Yeah. So then they could go, oh my God, look at these people, this is terrible.
Look at the Nazi problem.
Yeah, and then they could use it as an excuse to crack down on free speech. And to further the agenda of the police state. Now, what's your opinion on tearing down the statues of the Founding Fathers of the country and figures from the Confederate States of America?
I'm against it. You know, some people say, you know, we should privatize the statues. I mean, fine, but I just don't believe in the destruction of like historic culture like that. Especially for like such irrational, illegitimate reasons, as you know, if it's like, you know, seems like a place of like worship, and if it's like inspiring like violence and stuff, like for example, if there was like a there wouldn't be because it would be blasphemous, but just as an example, I can think of another. There was a statue of Muhammad in you know, Times Square, and because of that, you know, there was just a real radical community that inspired violence and stuff. I'll probably say maybe take the statue down. You know, fuck it, might be a good investment. And if that was the same thing with like these Confederate soldiers, they were like inspiring like KKK members to go burn churches, or if there was like any like real negative impact from these statues standing that we could notice, then yeah, I would say probably bring them down. But at this point, all I can see is they're just symbols that from a different era represent our history as a country, whether we like it or not. It is our history, and some people agree with it and value it for different reasons. Some people just value it for historical purposes. Some people value it morally. Other people just see it as just the most disgusting period of our human existence. But I don't think that that's a just reason to destroy art and destroy.
Well, here's the way I look at it: that it's become a tradition not only in the U.S. but around the world to put statues and things in parks and, you know, historic landmarks and stuff like that. It's a tradition. I mean, here in Mexico, you know, you'll find statues of Aztecs, and the Aztecs oppressed people and engaged in human sacrifices. Yeah. So, I mean, you go around the world. There's no culture is perfect. And I did a little research on statues, and did you know that in Seattle, Washington, and in New York City, there's statues of Vladimir Lenin. You know, and he wasn't even an American citizen. But and then there's statues of. Now, I actually like this guy, but a sports icon, Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I think Muhammad Ali was cool. I like him, but you know, he actually made racist and homophobic comments. If you go back and look at what he said, some of the things he said would shock people today.
Yeah.
Okay, should you go back and say, oh, geez, Muhammad Ali was a racist and a homophobe, so we should tear his statues down? I think there's a street named after him in Louisville, Kentucky. So we're going to tear that down in the name of political correctness. I mean, I think this is ridiculous, and people need to grow up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just like, you know, there's no culture in the world. Like, are we going to go to Rome and tear down the Roman Colosseum and the statue of Julius Caesar? You know, and you know, we could find something. Like, you could go and probably take like every statue and find something wrong with it.
Yeah.
You know, something's going to offend somebody. So, you know, why not just leave everybody's statues alone? You know what I mean? Just leave them alone and kind of move on. Now, have you ever been a member of the Libertarian Party?
No, I have not.
Would you ever consider joining the Libertarian Party?
There's only one one thing that could motivate me at this point to join the Libertarian Party, and that would be in support of Adam Kokesh. Okay. And not for his bid to run for not president, which, while I think that's fine and great, it's kind of impractical. Just completely dissolve the federal government through the Libertarian Party. But I get what he's going for, like a getting the word out, getting the message out, the idea. But the only reason that I would reconsider joining the Libertarian Party and supporting Kokesh is if, in addition to a complete dissolution of the Libertarian Party, if he wins, of the federal government, if he added in the Libertarian Party to that, if he said that if I win, not only will I fight to dissolve the federal government, but also if I win on a more practical level, I will fight for the absolute abolition and dissolvement of the Libertarian Party.
Wow.
I would probably consider supporting it.
Well, I think there would still be a need for a Libertarian Party, even if Adam Kokesh were to theoretically get elected and abolish the federal government, because you still have the state and local governments. And state and local government can get out of control too.
Yeah, but I mean, state and local governments, you know, I don't think you necessarily need a Libertarian Party to do that. I mean, there's people who aren't associated with any parties right now, who are just really have strong relations to the culture of their localities, who don't need any backing. Like D-Ray, for example, who is a leftist who I don't agree with, running for mayor in Baltimore and he has good prospects of winning. Just some dude off of Twitter is out competing actual party politicians. So I don't think we really need a party. Well,
the reality of our situation is that it's really hard to get ballot access and to raise money if you don't have a party apparatus, you know, surrounding you. So and it is also good. I mean, and I know, believe me, there's been problems, some serious dysfunction in the Libertarian Party. That's why I wish more people like yourself would actually get involved with it.
Yeah.
I think there is value in a Libertarian Party because it's a great way to teach people the message. And also, while the Libertarian Party is not in a position to be electing people to high-level offices, they can elect people to local offices and like state legislative races. And this is an issue that I'm big on, and that is the prospect of electing libertarians as sheriff and then implementing what I call the deputism plan. That is where the libertarian sheriff appoints libertarians as deputies and takes over law enforcement in a county. Now, it's probably not going to work in a high population county. Are you from Cobb County, Georgia?
Atlanta, so...
is that Cobb?
East.
What's it called?
East is DeKalb County.
Oh, DeKalb. Okay, well, that's probably a high population county, so your prospects of doing that there are not the greatest. But in a lower population county, where you could actually raise enough money to realistically get elected, I think that's something that libertarians could accomplish. And unfortunately, the party's too disorganized to do things like that. But what do you think of the deputism plan as I just presented it? Having a libertarian sheriff who appoints libertarians as deputies and takes over law enforcement.
That does sound interesting, and it's something that I would imagine could be very feasible. I haven't looked into it before, but as a just concept as you've explained it earlier, it does sound like something that would be really interesting and could really do some major influence. Not only major influence in terms of like changing the modifying the use of police in like American counties, but also in places like Acapulco, where there's really small police presence, and getting someone in a power there who like respects the values of libertarianism. It could, especially places like this where the police have such a presence, it could really modify people's perception on what for example the Acapulco culture represents, or what for example the DeKalb County culture represents, and by extension I imagine that venturing off into larger state representations, and maybe one day we get a libertarian FBI director. Who knows?
Well, libertarians have just not put ample effort into taking over local governments. And a lot of people think, well, show me an example of a libertarian-run society or city or county or something. And libertarians don't really have much to point to because they haven't done much of anything. You know what I mean? There hasn't been much effort put into this. Like people say, show me an example of a libertarian society, and what do people have to point to? Now, back in the 1980s, there was this town in Utah called Bigwater, and libertarians actually got a majority on the city council and elected a mayor there. And for 2 years, this was like a libertarian town. But this was way back in the 1980s, before the internet blew up and everything, and it was some little rinky-dink town in Utah. Since then, libertarians have not taken over anything. So we don't really have anything we can point to and say, well, what happens when libertarians take over? And so do you think that's something that libertarians should put some effort in? Like right now in Florida, there's a city in Florida called Frostproof, Florida. It's a city of about 3,500 people. It's a little bit south of, somewhere south of Orlando. Libertarian Party just recently elected 2 city councilmen. They got 5 seats on the city council. They get 1 more city council seat, they would have a majority. Now, how many people actually know about this? The Libertarian Party, the National Libertarian Party, has barely said a peep about it. And do you think that there would be value in libertarians taking over as city council somewhere so they can say, hey, see, this is what happens when libertarians take over?
Yeah, I can see value in it. If I was persuading somebody to which strategy to take, I don't know if I would recommend it. I mean, city council is an easier way to like infiltrate politics. So that would be something I would see as more feasible for somebody to try to do, rather than run for like a libertarian chair party and become the primary nominee on the federal ballot or something like that.
Because the presidential candidate isn't in a position to win unless they can raise a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe $1 billion or more. And even then, you'd have to overcome the vote rigging. And if it's a close election, it'll go to Congress. And since there's no libertarians in Congress, who do you think Congress is going to pick to be president? They'll pick a Democrat or a Republican.
Yeah, that's why I don't
it's more of an outreach campaign. That's what Ron Paul was doing. Ron Paul, and he was running as a Republican, and he was an elected Republican, but he was basically running a libertarian campaign in the Republican Party. But he was running, he knew that he wasn't going to win.
Yeah.
He was running more to inspire and educate.
Yeah.
And I think that's at this point what Kokesh would be doing.
And that's the main thing, that if you do at all get involved in libertarian politics, I would say that would be the only motivation, because we can't legitimately compete with the Republican or Democrat Party in terms of getting primary representation, especially presidential representation. But the thing is, if you can't infiltrate, and make these things possible and crush the state through politics, then the only other option is to just do it through relevance, to do it by mattering. So libertarians, Democrats and Republicans really don't matter, and people are kind of realizing that. And they're starting to give it less attention, but they still have this huge apparatus of power to be able to still win politics.
I'm wondering if with the growth of cryptocurrency, and you got a lot of libertarian and libertarian-leaning people getting rich off cryptocurrency, becoming millionaires and billionaires, if this could be the game changer for the Libertarian Party, if a new class of wealthy libertarians emerge and can start funding libertarian campaigns with cryptocurrency. Do you have any thoughts on cryptocurrency?
It's it's an awesome technology. Going to be pretty valuable, much more valuable in the future. I'm planning to buy some.
Oh, you haven't gotten in yet?
I got a little bit.
Yeah.
Nothing major. Maybe a few $100s.
Wow.
Yeah, nothing like not Roger Ver anytime soon.
Okay.
But yeah.
What's your thoughts on what Roger Ver is doing with this Free Society project, and also Liberland with Vit Jedlicka? They're trying to. Roger Ver is trying to start a libertarian country, as is Vit Jedlicka with Liberland. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think they're cool concepts. I don't know where. I've heard of Rogers. I don't know exactly where he plans to locate it. I know
he's searching for a place. He basically wants to go to some country and say, "Hey, look, we'll give you $500 million or $1 billion or whatever, and buy some land, and then sign a contract with that country that they won't interfere, and start a new libertarian country there."
And that could be interesting. But hopefully in a more appealing place than just I don't know, like the woods of Finland or something like that. Maybe somewhere a bit exotic.
Would you consider moving to a place like that if it gets up and running?
If it was cool, if it was a good community there, if it wasn't gimmicky, and if it had a good coastline, maybe I would consider it. It was like something resembling like the Free State Project, probably not. Because that's something I think is a bit more gimmicky. But
do you think that the Free State Project really? Have you ever thought about joining the Free State Project?
No.
Okay. Any particular reason?
Mainly just because I don't like the idea of just using fleeing as a means of activism. I think you can use fleeing as a means of creation, which is say that if you wanted to go off and create a whole new country, then I think that's awesome. But if you just want to flee the state in terms of just trying to ignore it.
Well, I think you have different people in the Free State Project applying different strategies, but I think their overall concept is that libertarians are too spread out throughout the country to get anything accomplished, and that if they concentrated their efforts, that if you took all the people who are at Anarchapulco, and if we formed our own city, it would be a libertarian city because everybody here is libertarian, or at least a libertarian leaner. I don't think there's anybody here that's really anti-liberty.
I don't know. I don't know if it'll become a libertarian city. I think it'll actually become the same thing that freedom. What am I talking about? Free State Project has become. In that the main fuck up that I thought the Free State Project had, which they could have. I don't know why they didn't think about this. But they went to New Hampshire, to Keene, not expecting with no intention of melding with the existing culture. They just thought that, hey, it's just a small government. There's a bit of low taxes, so I'm just going to go in. But people didn't accept them because they weren't
a backlash.
There wasn't any part of I want to actually come in and tell you how my ideas can benefit your culture. It was more selfish in that they just said, no, I'm just going to come in and establish my own thing and then just start fucking with everybody else who believes in the statism.
Well, that's the thing about New Hampshire. It's got over 1.3 million people there, and not everybody there is a libertarian. And some people thought New Hampshire... another state, the state that was the second runner-up in the Free State Project was Wyoming, which is a much less populated state. And I was in Wyoming for a little over 4 months, and there's a splinter group there that was people that were mad that New Hampshire became the Free State Project, so they started their own Free State Project in Wyoming. And this thing is so disorganized that I didn't even run into one person in Wyoming that even knew that there was a Free State Project in Wyoming. Yeah. So, even Wyoming, they have low taxes for the most part, and they have good, gun rights, and they're good. I wouldn't say, there's no state that's a libertarian state, but, Wyoming probably leans more libertarian than a lot of other states do. But something, even in Wyoming, there's a lot of big government people. I ran into plenty of big government Republicans and even some big government Democrats in freaking Wyoming, of all places. So point being is, like you just were making the point, that libertarians could come into these states, like New Hampshire, and think they're going to take over, and they're kind of getting a rude awakening. Obviously, that hasn't happened yet. That's why I kind of wonder if what Roger Ver is doing with this, Free Society thing, or the Liberland, or something like that, or do you know about the Private City Project in Norway, Liberstad.
Yeah.
I think maybe building private libertarian cities might be a better way to go. And then my concept is to have a contract to live in the city, like you sign a contract basically agreeing to abide by the non-aggression principle and maybe some other basic framework for whatever to live in the libertarian city. And if you violate it, then you should be physically removed. You know, kicked out like the Hoppian Covenant community. But anyway, okay, we'll wrap it up here. Before you go, could you give us your website or your you know, how do people want to follow you? You know, give us your information so people can follow you online.
On YouTube, which I mainly post my videos, That Guy T. On Twitter, Instagram, you can probably search That Guy T and find me. I'm probably one of the first 3 results. The @ handle is generally like @Black Guy T, because they keep banning my That Guy T Twitters. But outside of that, you can find my written work at fee.org. In addition to other places, I write under TJ Brown, or associated with That Guy T sometimes as well. And that's just.
I just thought of one more thing I wanted to bring up.
Sure.
Feminism. What's your opinion on radical feminism? Because I know you have some interesting thoughts on that.
Well, the thing is, I don't even use the term radical feminism anymore, because I've just come to the conclusion that feminism, in and of its core ideological self,